I never thought a simple dinner could unravel the entire life I thought I knew. But as the clock struck 7 p.m. that evening, everything I believed about my marriage, my wife, and even myself was about to come crashing down. It was a cold, rainy Tuesday. The kind of evening where everything feels damp and the world outside seems to slow down. I sat in my car for a few minutes before going inside, watching the droplets race down the windshield. I had this strange sensation, this nagging feeling that something wasn't right. It was one of those premonitions that you can't quite explain, but you know it's there. I shook it off as I stepped out of the car. Probably just tired, I told myself. The house was quiet when I walked in. Too quiet. I called out for Lisa, but the sound of my own voice echoed off the walls. No response. I set my bag down on the table and walked into the kitchen. She was standing there, looking out the window, her back to me. Her posture seemed different. There was an air about her, a stillness that I hadn't noticed before. I asked if everything was okay, but she didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned slowly to face me, her expression unreadable. "Hey," I said, trying to sound normal, though my heart was beating faster than usual. Lisa's eyes were clouded, distant. She was staring at me, but it wasn't the look of the woman I knew. It was almost like she was seeing right through me, as if I were a ghost. That's when I started feeling the first tremor of panic, but I tried to brush it off. "Dinner's ready," she said softly, almost too softly. I nodded and followed her to the table, my mind racing. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something was off. We sat down, the usual clinking of plates and forks filling the air, but it was different tonight. I could feel her eyes on me, watching me, as if waiting for something. After a few awkward minutes of eating, I put down my fork and cleared my throat. "Lisa, what's going on? You seem, I don't know, distant. Is something bothering you?" Her eyes flickered for a moment, but she didn't answer. Instead, she looked down at her plate. That's when I saw it. Her hand was trembling slightly, as if she was holding something back. I couldn't understand why she wouldn't just say it. Whatever it was, I had to know. "I've been thinking," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. I leaned in slightly, already dreading what was coming next. "About what?" Her gaze met mine, and for the first time that evening, I saw a flash of something in her eyes, something I hadn't seen in years. It was a mix of regret, fear, and something else. Something darker. She took a deep breath, and then she said the words that changed everything. "I'm leaving you." For a moment, the world just stopped. I couldn't hear anything. The sounds of the rain outside, the ticking of the clock on the wall, they all faded. It was as if time had paused, leaving just the two of us locked in this surreal moment. I didn't know how to react. My brain was trying to process what she'd just said, but it didn't make sense. "What do you mean? Leaving me? What, why?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood up and walked over to the window again, her back turned to me. I could see her shoulders shaking slightly, and for a brief second, I thought she was crying. But no tears came. She just stared out the window, lost in whatever thoughts she was trying to escape from. "I've been unhappy for a long time," she finally said, her voice flat. "I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. There's someone else. I've fallen in love with him." I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. The room felt too small suddenly. My heart felt like it was trying to tear itself out of my chest. It didn't register at first. Someone else? The woman I had been with for nearly a decade was telling me, just like that she had fallen in love with someone else? It didn't make sense. I had seen no signs. No arguments. No strange behavior. Nothing. "You're leaving me for him?" I managed to choke out. My voice was shaking. I was losing control of it, and I hated myself for it. She turned then, her face pale. She looked like she had been waiting for this moment, as if it had been inevitable. She nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and finality. "I'm sorry," she said again, her voice thick with something I couldn't name. "I didn't want to hurt you, but I have to be honest. I've been seeing him for months. I can't keep pretending." My mind was still reeling, trying to make sense of the pieces of the puzzle that were suddenly falling apart in front of me. But as I stood there, frozen, staring at her, something strange happened. A calmness washed over me. It wasn't relief or acceptance. It was something else entirely. A strange clarity. I didn't want to feel this way, but I did. I didn't feel anger or betrayal or even sadness. I just felt empty. I had been living a lie, and now that lie had been exposed. And that was when the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, insistent sound that cut through the silence of the room. Lisa froze, and for the briefest moment, she looked terrified. My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't understand it. What was happening? Why did the sudden sound of the doorbell seem to shake her more than her own confession? Before I could even speak, she rushed to the door, her footsteps hurried and nervous. Something in the way she moved, frantic, almost, made my heart race again. What was she doing? Who was at the door? And then, as she opened the door, I saw him. The man. The one she had been seeing behind my back. He was standing there, smiling as though nothing were amiss, as though this was all perfectly normal. And that was when I realized that my life, everything I thought I knew, was a carefully constructed lie. The door had opened to a new chapter in my life. A chapter one wasn't prepared for. But whether I was ready or not, it was already too late. The man standing in front of me was tall, well-built, dressed in a crisp black coat that looked out of place against the warm glow of our kitchen. He had dark, intense eyes, the kind of eyes that made you feel like he could see right through you. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there with this self-assured grin that rubbed me the wrong way. It was as if he knew exactly what was going to happen, and he was just waiting for me to catch up to his game. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest as I stared at him. He looked so calm, so confident, standing there on the other side of the doorway like he had every right to be there. But what really hit me was the way Lisa looked at him. It wasn't just affection, it was admiration, adoration. Her eyes were soft, her body language completely different from the woman I had been living with for so many years. She wasn't the woman I knew anymore. Not in that moment. I should have known. I finally managed to say, my voice tight with disbelief. It felt like the words were coming from someone else. I didn't recognize the man who was speaking. The shock was still holding me in a vice grip. This is who you've been seeing behind my back. Lisa's gaze shifted toward me, but she didn't answer. Instead, she took a step back and motioned toward him, the man who was now occupying the space I used to call home. This is Derek, she said, her voice barely audible. The man I've been with. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to scream, to demand every answer, to lash out, but something held me back. Maybe it was the fact that I still couldn't quite believe what was happening. Maybe I was still in shock. Or maybe, deep down, I was afraid of what the truth would look like if I looked too closely. Derek didn't look like the type of guy who would be intimidated by anything. He stepped past Lisa into the hallway without saying a word to me, his confidence bordering on arrogance. He didn't even look at me as he brushed past, as if I were an afterthought. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just watching the woman I loved walk out the door. I was being replaced, as if I never mattered. It wasn't just the affair. It wasn't just her betrayal. It was the way she stood there, so calm, so sure, as if everything was perfectly normal. I could feel a storm building inside me, a whirlwind of emotions that I couldn't quite control. My hands were shaking, and the world felt like it was closing in around me. But I did my best to keep my composure. If she thought I would break down in front of her, she had another thing coming. So this is it then? I asked, my voice low and controlled, though I was fighting to keep it steady. You're really just going to throw away everything we had for him? Lisa's face faltered for a moment, but she quickly masked it with indifference. I never meant for things to go this far, she said, the words tasting like ash on her tongue. But I can't keep pretending, Ethan. I don't love you anymore. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine at her words. It was like she was cutting off every single tie that had once connected us, one by one. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How did we go from the couple who laughed over silly jokes to this? How had I missed the signs? Derek was standing there in the hallway, just watching us. His arms crossed over his chest, a smug expression on his face as if this was a showdown he'd already won. The nerve of this guy. He had no respect. I wanted to tell him to leave, to get out of my house, but I didn't know if I had the right anymore. The idea that this man was now the center of Lisa's world, that he was the reason she was walking away from everything we had. It made me feel like a stranger in my own life. Lisa took a few steps toward Derek, and I couldn't help but notice the way she looked at him. There was something in her gaze, something tender, something that told me this wasn't a fling or a passing infatuation. This was real. She had made a choice I wasn't a part of. I'm sorry, Ethan, Lisa said softly. I never wanted to hurt you. But you have to understand. I need this. I need to feel alive again. The words hit me harder than anything she'd said before. I wasn't enough for her. I wasn't enough to keep her, to make her feel fulfilled. The realization was suffocating. What had gone wrong? What had I missed? Alive. I echoed bitterly. Is this what you call being alive? Walking out on everything we built, everything we shared, for him? Her expression softened, but only for a second. Then, she wiped away the faintest trace of a tear before shaking her head, as if trying to convince herself of something. I didn't want it to be like this. But I can't stay, Ethan. Not when my heart is with someone else. I stood there for a long moment, trying to make sense of it. The words bounced around in my head like a shattered mirror, each fragment sharp and painful. I felt like I was suffocating in the reality of what was happening. But there was nothing I could do. Nothing I could say to change her mind. I thought about the years we spent together, the laughter, the late-night talks, the dreams we shared. And now, it was all crumbling away in front of me, like sand slipping through my fingers. Derek took a step closer to Lisa, placing his hand on her shoulder possessively. It was subtle, but it was there, and I noticed it. He was claiming what was his, what he had taken from me. And in that moment, I understood that it wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about everything I had lost, the life I thought was mine, the woman I thought I knew. They were both gone, slipping away into a future that didn't include me. I didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do. I stood frozen in that doorway, watching them, both of them, as they prepared to leave my life. I wanted to scream, to fight, to demand justice for everything they had stolen from me. But all I could do was watch them walk out. And as they left, the door closing softly behind them, I knew that this was just the beginning. The beginning of something I wasn't prepared for, but had no choice but to face. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. Everything had changed, and I had to find a way to survive it. The door closed with a soft click, leaving me standing in the hallway, alone. The sound of the rain pounding against the windows seemed to echo in my ears, but it was nothing compared to the silence that engulfed the house now. The silence that made my heart beat painfully in my chest. I couldn't move at first. I was rooted to the spot, my mind trying to piece together what had just happened. The image of Lisa and Derek standing together, side by side, had burned itself into my mind. The way she had looked at him, there was something so final about it. A kind of certainty that I couldn't understand. How had we gone from sharing a life to this? I couldn't breathe. I walked aimlessly through the house, each step feeling heavier than the last. The walls seemed to close in around me, suffocating me. I tried to grab hold of something, anything, to make sense of it all, but it felt like my life had just been yanked out from under me, and I was left dangling in the air with no way to land. I reached the kitchen and saw the remnants of our dinner. The plates, the silverware, the half-eaten casserole that Lisa had so carefully prepared. It was so painfully normal, so mundane, yet everything had changed. It was all a lie, a cruel joke. She had been planning this for months, hiding it from me, living two lives, and I was none the wiser. I slammed my hand down on the countertop, the sound sharp and sudden in the quiet. The pain in my palm was nothing compared to the agony in my chest, but it helped. I needed something to anchor myself, something to ground me. The thought of Derek was like a knife twisting in my side. The audacity of him, standing there in my house, acting as if he had every right to be there. I didn't know whether to hate him or pity him. He was everything I wasn't. Confident, assertive, charming, the kind of man who could make a woman forget her vows, forget her past, forget everything she had built with someone else. And now, he was taking Lisa away from me. The man who had no history with her, no shared memories. The man who didn't have to fight for her, who didn't have to prove his love every day. I felt my fists clench at my sides, my jaw tightening. I wanted to tear apart everything I had once called home. I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs and ask her why. Why had she chosen him? Why had she thrown everything we had away for someone else? But no matter how hard I tried, no words would come. I turned and paced the living room, my mind a tornado of thoughts. I tried to convince myself that maybe there had been signs I missed, small things, little cracks in the foundation of our marriage that had been growing without me noticing. But the truth was, I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think that Lisa, the woman I had loved and trusted for so long, could betray me like this. I wasn't ready to let go, and I wasn't ready to lose her. But then I remembered something. Something Lisa had said in the midst of her confession. I need to feel alive again. Those words kept ringing in my ears. I had no idea what that meant. Was I not enough for her? Had I become too comfortable, too predictable? Was that why she had sought someone else? I sank down onto the couch, my head in my hands. The weight of it all was crushing me. I had never felt so alone, so utterly lost. My mind wandered to the months we had spent together before everything started to fall apart. I tried to pinpoint the moment when things had begun to change, but it was like searching for a needle in a haystack. There were no obvious signs, no loud arguments, no dramatic events. It was all so subtle, so gradual. But something had shifted. I stood up suddenly, the need to do something consuming me. I grabbed my coat, throwing it over my shoulders as I walked to the front door. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay here. Not in this house, not with these memories. The silence was unbearable. I stepped outside, the cool night air hitting my face like a slap. I didn't know where I was walking, only that I had to get away from the suffocating walls of my house. My feet carried me down the street without much thought, my mind still reeling from everything that had happened. I didn't know how long I had been walking when I finally stopped. I was at the park now, the same park where Lisa and I used to go for evening walks when we first started dating. I could almost see us there, hand in hand, talking about our dreams, our future. The memories flooded back in a rush, each one more painful than the last. I felt like I was drowning in them. I sat down on one of the benches, my hands trembling. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, sadness, confusion. I didn't know what to feel anymore. My life had just been ripped apart, and all I could do was sit here, staring at the empty path ahead of me, trying to make sense of it all. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to get rid of the pain that was eating me alive. But I couldn't. I didn't know where to go or who to turn to. My friends, my family, they wouldn't understand. No one would. And then, as if out of nowhere, I felt a presence beside me. I turned and looked up, startled, to find a figure standing just a few feet away. It was Derek. I don't know how he had found me. I didn't know how long he had been standing there, watching me. But there he was, standing in front of me like he had every right to be. The anger flared up in me, quick and hot, but I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to lash out, to tell him everything I had kept bottled up inside, but the words stuck in my throat. He stared down at me, his expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he finally broke the silence. "Ethan," he said, his voice low, almost too calm. "I didn't come here to fight, but I think we need to talk." I stared at him, my mind racing. Talk? What was there to talk about? He had already taken what was mine. There was nothing left to say. But somehow, in that moment, I knew the conversation was far from over. And I was about to find out just how far things would go before I was truly out of the picture. I couldn't believe my eyes. Derek, the last person I wanted to see, the man who had walked into my life and stolen everything that had once felt real, was standing right in front of me, his hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket. His calm demeanor only made my anger flare more. He was so composed, so smug, like he had every right to be here, like everything that had just happened wasn't the mess it was. I stood up, the bench creaking beneath me, and for a second, I thought I was going to lose control. Part of me wanted to punch him right there, maybe knock that smug look off his face. But another part of me, the rational part buried deep inside, knew that wasn't going to do anything. It wouldn't change the fact that Lisa was with him now, that she had already made her decision. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice cold. I didn't want to know. I didn't want him to explain himself. But somehow, the words slipped out before I could stop them. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready to face him. Not like this, not after everything that had happened. Derek studied me for a moment, as if he was evaluating whether I was worth his time. His eyes were dark, like he was searching for something. Maybe for a crack in my armor. Maybe for a sign of weakness. But there was nothing. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break down. Not in front of him. "I didn't come here to fight, Ethan," he said, his voice smooth, almost too smooth. He spoke like a man who knew exactly what he was doing. "I just want you to understand something." He paused, his gaze shifting toward the park ahead of us. I could feel the air between us thickening, charged with something I couldn't quite name. "This isn't personal. It's just life. Life," I repeated, my voice thick with disbelief. "You're standing here, telling me that what you did isn't personal? That everything that's happened between me and Lisa, our entire marriage, was just some coincidence, just some random event? I took a step toward him, my fist clenching again, but I stopped myself. I wasn't going to let him provoke me. Derek didn't flinch. He just took a deep breath, as if he were speaking to a child. Look, Ethan, I get it. You're hurt. I'm not some monster. I never meant to hurt you. But at the same time, I'm not going to apologize for something that's out of my control. He took a step closer, his voice dropping lower, almost in a whisper. You and Lisa, well, it wasn't working. Not for her. And you know that, even if you don't want to admit it. The words hit me like a slap, and I felt my chest tighten. My mind was racing, trying to process what he was saying. I had known, deep down, that something was wrong. That things hadn't been right between me and Lisa for months. But hearing him say it out loud, hearing him confirm the things I had been too afraid to face, was another blow entirely. I wanted to shout, to tell him he was wrong, to demand that he leave and never come near me again. But all I could do was stand there, my throat tight, my body rigid. Do you really think it's that simple? I finally managed to say, my voice raw. You think this is just about her needing someone else? That it was just some random thing you two decided on? That's not how it works. It's not that simple. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. We were married. We had plans. We had a future. You think you can just walk in and take that away from me? Derek's face hardened, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't calm or confident. There was a flicker of something. Doubt, maybe, or guilt. It was gone in an instant, replaced by that same cold expression. You think I don't know that? He said, his voice suddenly sharp. I didn't want to be the one who did this, Ethan. I didn't ask for any of this. But sometimes things just happen. And when they do, you can either fight it or accept it. And right now, I think you need to accept it. My heart sank at his words. It wasn't just the coldness in his voice that hurt. It was the fact that he had no idea what I had lost. He didn't care. All he saw was a game. He wasn't here to make amends, to explain himself, or even to apologize. He was here to tell me that I was no longer part of the equation. That Lisa had made her choice, and now it was his turn to walk away with the prize. I felt a surge of anger course through me, but I quickly pushed it down. This wasn't about him. It was about me and Lisa. I needed answers from her, not him. I wasn't going to let Derek or anyone else dictate my emotions any longer. I had to face the truth of what was happening, even if it destroyed me. You're wrong about one thing, Derek, I said, my voice steadying as I forced the words out. It's not that simple. You're not just some substitute for what I had with her. You'll never be me, and she'll realize that eventually. Derek gave me a long, hard look, like he was deciding whether or not to laugh at me. Maybe, he said, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly. But I'm here now, Ethan. And you're not. He turned to walk away, but before he did, he glanced back one last time. Just so you know, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not the one who's going to lose. And with that, he walked off into the darkness of the park, his silhouette fading into the night. I stood there for a long moment, the weight of his words sinking in. It wasn't just Lisa I had to face now. It was everything I thought I knew about myself, about my life. Derek had taken more than my wife. He had taken my confidence, my stability, the sense of security I had spent years building. And as much as I hated it, I had to accept it. But I wasn't done yet. I wasn't going to let everything slip away without a fight. The rain had picked up again by the time Derek disappeared into the dark. I stood frozen in place, my mind a tangled mess of confusion, anger, and something else I couldn't quite place. Part of me wanted to run after him, to confront him one more time, to tear him apart with the truth that he wasn't the man for Lisa, that he was just a passing moment in her life. But the other part of me, the part that was shattered and exhausted, told me to walk away, to accept that this battle was already lost. But I couldn't accept it. Not yet. Not when I didn't understand why it was happening in the first place. I glanced down at my phone. It was just past midnight. The city around me was still, save for the occasional car passing by, its headlights cutting through the rainy fog. I turned back toward the park bench where I had been sitting earlier. There was something about this place. It used to be a refuge, a space where Lisa and I would share long talks, watching the stars until they vanished beneath the morning light. And now, it felt like a graveyard for my dreams. Every corner of this park was a reminder of what I had lost. I could feel the weight of the night bearing down on me, making it harder to breathe. I needed to figure this out. I needed answers from Lisa. If she was truly gone, if she had really chosen Derek over me, then I needed to know why. What had I missed? What had gone wrong? And most importantly, how could I fix it? I couldn't just let go without understanding. I couldn't just accept that the woman I had shared my life with had walked away without a trace, leaving me with nothing but a hole where my future once was. I wanted closure, even if it was something brutal. I needed to face it head on, no matter how much it hurt. Without thinking, I pulled out my phone and dialed Lisa's number. The first ring echoed in my ears, and I felt a small spark of hope. Maybe she had been lying to me earlier. Maybe she was just confused, overwhelmed by the chaos in her life. Maybe, just maybe, she'd answer and tell me she made a mistake. But the second ring came and went. Then the third. Then the voicemail. I cursed under my breath and hung up. I stared at the screen for a moment, contemplating whether to leave a message. What would I even say? That I was sorry? That I missed her? That I couldn't stand the thought of her with Derek? I shook my head, disgusted with myself. I couldn't beg her to come back. I couldn't force her to love me again. But I needed to talk to her. I needed to see her one last time, to try to understand what the hell had happened. I knew where she would be. The thought hit me like a wave. The place where we used to meet when we first started dating, the old coffee shop. She loved it there. It was where we had our first kiss, our first real conversation that lasted for hours, talking about everything and nothing. It was where we promised each other that we would always be there, no matter what. I grabbed my jacket, not bothering to take my phone with me, and stepped back into the storm. The cold rain hit my skin like 1,000 tiny needles, but I didn't care. I needed answers. I needed to face this. I walked through the streets of the city, the familiar landmarks no longer holding the same comfort they once did. Everything felt different now, like I was moving through someone else's world. My world had changed the moment Derek walked into it, and now I had no idea where I was supposed to go. The coffee shop was just a few blocks away, nestled on a quiet corner near the old bookstore. The neon sign flickered in the rain, casting a soft glow on the wet pavement. It looked the same as it always had, charming, inviting. But it wasn't the same for me anymore. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, the warmth from the space enveloping me like a comforting embrace. I looked around, but the place was nearly empty, just a few people scattered at tables, lost in their own worlds. And then I saw her. Lisa was sitting by the window, staring out at the rain, her fingers wrapped around a cup of coffee. She looked so different from the woman I remembered, so distant, as if the person sitting there wasn't the same person I had once known so well. I stood frozen at the door, unsure if I should approach her. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it. This was the moment that could either heal or completely shatter whatever was left of us. But I couldn't walk away. I couldn't leave without hearing her side of the story. Without understanding why she chose Derek, why she walked away from everything we had. I took a deep breath and walked toward her table. She didn't look up at first, but I saw her body tense the moment I sat down across from her. "Ethan," she said, her voice quiet but not surprised. She hadn't even looked at me yet, as if she couldn't bear to. I didn't say anything at first. I just sat there, trying to control the storm of emotions raging inside me. My hands were clammy, my throat tight. But I needed to do this. I needed to hear the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Finally, she met my gaze. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying, but her expression was resolute. She wasn't going to back down. "I didn't want this," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "I never wanted to hurt you, Ethan. But I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep lying to myself about how I felt." "Then why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Why didn't you tell me you were unhappy? Why didn't you say anything before it got this far?" She shook her head, the tears threatening to spill. "Because I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know how to hurt you. And when Derek came into the picture, I thought maybe it was just a phase, something that would go away. But it didn't. And by the time I realized it, I had already fallen in love with him." Her words sliced through me. They were raw, honest, and brutally painful. But they were the truth. I could feel it. The worst part wasn't hearing that she loved someone else. It was hearing that she had chosen him over me. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she whispered, her voice breaking. I swallowed the lump in my throat, trying to push past the tears that threatened to rise. "I just don't understand. I thought we had something real, something worth fighting for." Lisa didn't answer at first. She just stared at her coffee cup, her hands trembling. I wanted to reach across the table, to take her hand, to tell her that I was still willing to fight. But I knew better. She was already gone. And now, I had to figure out how to move on without her. The storm outside had nothing on the one raging inside me. But I couldn't stay here any longer. This conversation, as painful as it was, had given me the closure I needed. I stood up, my legs shaky. I guess this is goodbye then. Lisa nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. I never wanted it to end this way, but it's over, Ethan. I hope you find happiness again. I didn't know if I would, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep holding on to the past. I turned and walked out of the coffee shop, leaving behind the woman I thought I would spend my life with. The rain had stopped, but the weight of what had just happened pressed heavily on my shoulders. I didn't know what my future held, but I knew one thing. I was no longer living in the past, and it was time to find a way to live again. The walk back to my car felt like a slow-motion blur, the world around me muted and distant. Lisa's words echoed in my head over and over. I thought maybe it was just a phase, something that would go away. But it didn't. The weight of it all pressed down on me, suffocating me with the reality that the woman I had loved for years, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, had already chosen someone else. Not only that, but she had been living a double life, hiding her true feelings while I was left in the dark. I replayed the look in her eyes when she told me she'd fallen in love with Derek. The raw vulnerability mixed with a cold finality that said it was over. There was no coming back. I should have expected it. After all, I had been feeling the distance between us for months. I just didn't know how deep it ran. I finally reached my car, but I didn't get in immediately. I stood by the door, staring at the empty street ahead of me, trying to steady my breath. I should have been angry, furious even, but all I felt was exhaustion. Every part of me ached, but I wasn't sure what for. Was it the loss of Lisa? The betrayal? Or was it the shattering of everything I had thought was stable? Everything that had once made me feel like I had control over my life. The drive home was a blur. The road seemed endless, and the steady rhythm of the windshield wipers was the only sound accompanying me through the rain-soaked streets. I couldn't shake the thought of her, the image of her sitting there in the coffee shop, broken but resolute. I had asked her if she ever loved me, and the answer hadn't come. It was clear that something inside her had died long before Derek had walked into the picture. I just didn't want to see it. When I finally reached my house, it felt alien. The place that used to be a sanctuary now felt like a prison, a reminder of everything I had lost. I stepped inside, the quietness of the house amplifying the emptiness I was feeling inside. I walked through the living room, passing by the bookshelf we had both picked out together, the couch where we had shared countless lazy Sunday afternoons. The familiar sights only made the pain worse. I stopped in front of the mirror by the entryway, looking at myself. The man staring back at me was a stranger. His eyes were hollow, his face drawn, the weight of the night pressing down on his shoulders. I couldn't even recognize the person I saw. I had always prided myself on being strong, in control of my emotions, but now, all I could feel was a hollow emptiness. I was consumed by the thought that I had failed, that I hadn't been enough for her, that somehow, all the effort I had put into this relationship, into this life we had built, had been for nothing. I walked upstairs, the house still eerily quiet. I reached our bedroom, and the sight of it hit me like a punch to the gut. The bed was untouched, the pillow on her side still perfectly arranged. For a moment, I almost expected her to walk through the door, to tell me that everything was going to be okay, that we could fix this. But she wasn't coming back. I knew that now. I collapsed onto the bed, burying my face in the pillow. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I was better than this. I wasn't going to break down. But the more I tried to hold it together, the more I felt like I was unraveling. I had never felt so small, so powerless in my life. I had no control over what was happening, and it drove me mad. Hours passed. I didn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. The clock ticked in the background, each minute that passed only deepening the sense of loss and confusion I felt. I got up, pacing the room, trying to find some semblance of clarity. What was I supposed to do now? Was this the end? Was I supposed to just move on? But how could I? How could I forget the years we spent together, the love I thought we had? I found myself thinking of Derek again. A part of me wanted to despise him, to label him as the villain in this whole tragedy. But another part of me wondered, What was it about him that made Lisa choose him over me? Was he really that different? Was it his confidence, his charm? Or was it simply that she had lost faith in me, in us? I didn't have the answers, but I couldn't help but feel that this wasn't just about him. It was about something deeper, something I had missed all along. I reached for my phone, the impulse to text Lisa overwhelming. Maybe I could get some answers, some closure, but deep down, I knew it was pointless. She had made her choice. I didn't need her to explain herself. I didn't need her validation. What I needed was to let go. But letting go felt impossible. How was I supposed to just walk away from everything I had known? I sent the text anyway, my fingers shaking as I typed. I still don't understand. What happened to us? Why did it end like this? The message sat there on the screen for a long moment. I stared at it, waiting for her response. I don't know why I thought she'd reply. Maybe I hoped that some part of her still cared enough to explain. But deep down, I knew it was over. And just like that, the weight of the decision settled in. I couldn't keep holding on to something that no longer existed. I had to face the truth, no matter how much it hurt. She had already moved on, and I had to do the same. But moving on seemed impossible. The phone buzzed in my hand, startling me. My heart skipped a beat as I looked down at the screen. It wasn't Lisa. It was a message from one of my friends, Ryan, asking if I wanted to meet up and grab a drink. I almost laughed at the irony. How was I supposed to explain this to him? How was I supposed to explain to anyone what was happening? For the first time in what felt like forever, I knew I had to talk to someone. I couldn't keep this all inside. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine when I was slowly falling apart. I replied with a simple, "Yeah, sure. I need to get out of here." Maybe talking to someone would help. Maybe it wouldn't. But at least for tonight, I didn't have to be alone with my thoughts. Maybe that was the first step toward moving forward. But I knew deep down that the journey I was about to take was one I never wanted to face. And there was no going back. Ryan's message buzzed again, but this time, I didn't answer right away. The urgency to talk to someone, to just escape the pit of my own thoughts, was growing stronger. But even as I stared at my phone, I knew the conversation wasn't going to help. What was I supposed to say? That I had just found out that the woman I loved had left me for another man? That my life, which had once seemed so certain, had shattered in the span of an evening? It was too much. Ryan had always been the type of friend who liked to make light of things, always cracking jokes, deflecting any serious conversations. He wouldn't know how to handle this. And honestly, I didn't know if I wanted him to. I could already picture his reaction, his awkward attempts to lighten the mood, offering some cliched advice about how I needed to move on or focus on myself. As if anything could change in a matter of days. As if my entire world hadn't just been ripped from its foundation. What I needed right now wasn't some cheap pep talk. I needed answers. I needed to understand why I hadn't seen it coming. Why I was left standing in the rubble of what used to be my life, searching for something to hold on to. I put the phone down on the table, pushing it aside as if the device itself could somehow block out the thoughts swirling in my head. The house felt emptier than ever. I walked back into the living room, sitting on the couch as the weight of the silence pressed down on me. There was something eerie about the way the darkness wrapped itself around the room. The silence felt suffocating, like a heavy curtain falling over everything. I had no idea how long I sat there, staring at the empty walls. But eventually, my thoughts began to spin again, and I found myself thinking about that night, the night Lisa and I shared just a few weeks ago. I tried to recall the way she had kissed me, the way she had held me, the way we had promised each other that we would never let anything come between us. Had she already been thinking about Derek then? Was she already so deep in the web of this affair that everything we shared had become meaningless to her? Or had it happened slowly, a gradual shift that she'd buried deep inside, waiting for the moment to tell me it was over? I felt my chest tighten as I tried to push the thought away. The idea that I had been so blind, so naive, to not see the signs made me sick to my stomach. What had I missed? I tried to retrace our steps, to pinpoint where things started to go wrong. The late nights she would come home from work, always so tired, too tired to talk. The long stretches of silence between us, the conversations that used to be easy but now felt forced. But it wasn't enough. I couldn't figure it out. It didn't make sense. And then, as I sat there, caught between memories of what we had and the reality of what was happening, something shifted inside me. I couldn't stay in this place of confusion forever. I couldn't keep asking myself the same questions, letting the doubt eat away at me. I had to take control. I had to find the truth. Not just about what had happened between Lisa and me, but about myself. I stood up abruptly, the decision hitting me with the force of a sudden storm. I was going to confront Derek. I wasn't going to hide anymore, pretending like I could just move on without facing this head-on. I needed to see him, to hear him say it, to hear it from the person who had become the catalyst for the destruction of everything I had built. My phone buzzed again, this time pulling me back to reality. It was Ryan, again, asking if I was okay. For a split second, I considered texting him back, telling him everything. But no, not tonight. I wasn't ready to talk about this yet. Not with him. Not with anyone. This was something I had to figure out on my own. I grabbed my jacket from the coat rack, still feeling the sting of the night hanging over me. I wasn't sure where Derek was right now, but I knew I could find him. He worked at a nearby gym, and I had seen him there a few times when I used to go for my own workouts. If he wasn't there, I'd track him down. I didn't care. Tonight, I wasn't going to hide behind the walls of my own house, letting the pain of everything that had happened consume me. I was going to face it. The streets felt colder now, the wind picking up as the rain began to taper off. My thoughts were still racing, but now there was a singular focus. A sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't sure what I was going to say to Derek, but I knew I couldn't keep waiting for closure. I couldn't keep pretending like I had any control over my life when every piece of it had been torn apart. The gym was just a few miles away, and the drive felt longer than it should have. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My mind was flooded with so many conflicting emotions: rage, confusion, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. But above all, I felt one thing clearly. I wasn't done. I wasn't going to let Derek or anyone else take what was mine without a fight. As I pulled into the gym parking lot, I saw the lights still on through the windows. I got out of the car, my boots splashing through the puddles that had formed on the pavement. My heart was racing now, and the adrenaline in my veins felt sharp and electric. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to find, but I knew one thing. This had to happen. I needed to face him. I needed to hear him say it. I walked through the entrance, the smell of sweat and metal filling the air. The receptionist glanced up at me as I walked past, but I didn't stop. I knew exactly where to go. I made my way through the hall, my mind locked in on the goal. And then I saw him. Derek was at the back of the gym, lifting weights as if he had all the time in the world, as if he didn't have a care in the world. His back was turned to me, and for a moment, I hesitated. I could walk away. I could turn around and leave. But I didn't. I stepped forward, my feet moving without thinking. "Derek," I said, my voice low, but it carried through the silence of the gym. He froze, his shoulders tensing slightly before he slowly turned around, giving me the coldest smile I had ever seen. "Ethan," he said, almost as if he had been expecting me. "I didn't think you'd show up." I took a step closer, my fists clenched at my sides. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. The moment that could change everything. "I need to understand," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but it was charged with everything I had been holding in. "Why? Why her? Why now?" Derek didn't answer right away. He stood there, studying me with that same smug expression that made my blood boil. And then, with a shrug that seemed almost rehearsed, he spoke the words that broke me for good. "Because I can, Ethan. Because I'm what she needs now." Those words, delivered so casually, were the final blow. I was standing there, completely exposed, everything I had tried to protect shattered by a man who had never even cared to understand the damage he was causing. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about Lisa or Derek. This was about my own fight. A fight for the life I had lost, and the one I was now forced to rebuild. But I wasn't sure where to start. And so, I stood there, staring into Derek's eyes, knowing that I had a long way to go before I could truly move on from this. And I had no idea what the next step would be. The gym felt suffocating as I stood there, staring at Derek, his smug grin still lingering in the air like an unwelcome shadow. But this time, something inside me snapped. The weight of his words, the finality of his presence, it all started to fade, replaced by something I hadn't felt in a long time: clarity. I was no longer fighting for her. I wasn't even fighting for the life I thought I had. I was fighting for myself. Derek stood there, still waiting for some kind of reaction, his arms crossed, almost as if he were daring me to keep going. But I was done. I had spent too long letting him, and the situation control me. I wasn't going to be the victim anymore. I wasn't going to let this man define who I was or who I could become. You can have her, Derek, I said, my voice firm now, my body relaxed for the first time in what felt like months. But you're right about one thing. You don't need to worry about me. I'm done letting this define me. Derek's expression shifted slightly, surprise flickering across his face. He clearly wasn't expecting this response. But I didn't care. I had spent too long tied up in questions, in doubts, in anger, but none of that was going to change anything. I had been holding on to a ghost. I realized now that I had to let go. I turned and walked out of the gym, my steps light and sure, each one taking me further from the shadow of my past. The cool night air hit my face, and for the first time, I actually felt something. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I wasn't running from the truth anymore. I had faced it. I had stood up for myself, even when it felt impossible. And that, I realized, was the first step toward healing. As I stepped into my car, I didn't feel the burden of loss anymore. Sure, the pain would linger, but I knew now that it wouldn't control me. I was no longer the person who needed to chase after a love that had already left. I was the person who would rebuild, who would grow stronger, and who would eventually find his own path forward. I wasn't alone in this. The next few days weren't easy, but they didn't need to be. Life wasn't supposed to be easy. What mattered was how you responded, how you learned from the challenges that came your way. And I was ready for whatever came next. I reached out to old friends, reconnected with people I had pushed away in my pursuit of something that wasn't even real anymore. I found a renewed passion for the things I once loved, and started to rediscover the person I had been before all this chaos entered my life. Months later, I was sitting in that same coffee shop where Lisa and I had once shared so many happy moments. But this time, it felt different. I had reclaimed my life, piece by piece. I wasn't bitter anymore. I had learned that life wasn't about holding on to something that wasn't meant to be. It was about moving forward, about finding joy in the small moments and building a future that was truly mine. As I sipped my coffee, I thought about how far I had come. I had found strength in the midst of pain. I had learned to let go of the things I couldn't control. And most importantly, I had learned that healing isn't about forgetting the past. It's about accepting it and growing from it. The door opened, and I looked up to see a familiar face walk in. It was Ryan. He waved as he made his way to the counter to grab a coffee, and as he passed by my table, he paused. "You look different, man," he said with a grin. "I haven't seen you like this in a while." I smiled, feeling a warmth that I hadn't felt in a long time. "Yeah," I replied, meeting his eyes. "I think I'm finally getting back to where I need to be." I wasn't sure what the future held or where it would take me, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid. The road ahead was mine to walk, and I was ready to embrace it with everything I had. I had come through the storm, and now it was time to find the sunshine.